Welcome to another live video. I'm Jamie from ESL Teacher 365, and today I will be going over some Teach Abroad questions. I've been gathering questions from YouTube, Instagram, my email list, and I have some helpful questions for you today. I would love to know if you're joining us live or if you're catching up on the replay, how long have you been teaching? I've been teaching I started teaching before I went to university. So I did some tutoring. I also taught abroad while I was still in university. So it's been a very long time. I would say maybe I started around 2007 is when I really first started teaching English. And I've also taught dance abroad, and I've been teaching dance for just about as long. So share with us in the comments how long you have been teaching. Okay, the way that today will work is I've gathered a bunch of questions. I'll go over them, but if you have any questions that I haven't gotten to or that pop up, then just leave a comment. I'll be able to see them and we will go from there. Excellent. Let's start with the first question. This is a question from one of the members of my Teach Abroad club, and I thought that this was a really good one to start off with. So, are Teach Abroad jobs done online, in person, or hybrid? And what is the most common? This is an interesting question because 2020 and everything that happened with people using online education, it really changed this. I think that now jobs abroad are actually looking for people who also are able to teach online, because you will find jobs abroad that are looking for teachers who can teach in a hybrid way. So maybe you have some hours that are in person, you have other hours that are online. But typically for teaching abroad, these are going to be in-person positions, typically at schools, but not always. But there are options. If you want to travel and teach, you can do that online as well. The best option is the digital nomad visas that are kind of popping up everywhere these days. It seems like more and more countries are making these available. So most common in person, but there are definitely opportunities for teaching online. Hybrid is highly valued, and yeah, pretty much any situation that you'd like is available for teaching abroad. Our next question is, can I bring a family member when I teach abroad? This will come down to the visa situation. A lot of times you're able to add a dependent on your visa. This could be something like a partner, a wife, a husband, could also be a child. But this is going to depend on if you're going through a program, if you're being hired directly from the school, if you're working at an international school. It's hard to say yes to this as a general rule, but yes, there are opportunities to do this. For international schools, you will find that some schools are looking for single teachers. Some schools are open to you bringing your family, and they'll actually give you tuition for your children. For ESL teaching, it's a little bit trickier. Often you can bring a partner or a dependent child, but maybe they can't work. So that's something to consider as well. And also, you might have to be in a legal partnership to be able to bring them too. So you might need to be legally married. Maybe the marriage laws are different in the country where you want to teach. So it does involve doing some more research, but it is possible. CELTA versus TEFL. Are there countries that prefer one over the other? I get this question a lot, usually from people who are emailing me and they're saying, which course should I do, CELTA or TEFL? Well, technically, CELTA is the Cambridge brand TEFL certificate, so they're essentially both TEFLs. You'll find that there are a lot of different providers for TEFL courses. You have good ones, you have sketchy ones, and you just need to be careful when choosing your TEFL certificate. But in general, CELTA is kind of the gold standard. It's the most well-known, it's highly regulated, and yes, some countries, specifically in Europe and the Middle East, are going to value this higher than other TEFL courses. It's a very challenging course. I took mine here in Australia. It really prepares you for teaching adults. So that being said, if you're wanting to teach kids, it's not always the best course for you to take. If you do need a recommendation for a TEFL course, I recommend filling out my survey, which is in this video description. You can tell me a little bit about your goals, where you want to teach, your qualifications you already have, and I can recommend a course for you. But in general, if you're wanting to teach in more competitive countries in Europe or the Middle East, they do like CELTA. Are there more jobs for teaching kids or adults? This really depends on the country. So if you look at it country by country, for example, in Vietnam, teaching kids is a lot more popular. There's a lot more positions for that. Looking at other places, maybe there will be business English is quite big, so there's more opportunities to teach adults. You really have to look at the specific countries that you're interested in to find this out. A good place to start, there are some websites that have kind of like profiles for teaching English online. So you have Go Overseas, Go Abroad, and International TEFL Academy have kind of like country guides, and they will talk about some of the typical ways to teach in those countries. So if you just Google like teach English in Japan, those pages will pop up and you'll have these nice country profiles, and they will give you some information on, is it more typical to teach in primary schools, or are there English language schools, or maybe you can teach all ages. That's where I would recommend going to find that information. What's the best way to contact schools to show your interest in teaching there? There are a lot of different ways to find jobs abroad, and one of the ways is to just Google schools in that country and contact them directly. If you do this, sometimes you might need to speak the local language. That will just make it easier, because at some of these schools, they don't necessarily have English speaking admin. So you might need to consider that, but if you don't speak the language, that's okay. I recommend sending an email and maybe attaching your CV or resume, letting them know that you're interested in teaching at their school. You can request an interview, or you can just send them your CV or resume and ask them to keep it on file if any positions become available. You can do this if you're a certified teacher for international schools. You can do this for TEFL teaching abroad as well. And in this question, the person that asked me also asked about the email, like how long should it be? How short should it be? I would keep it pretty short and sweet. I imagine that these schools get a lot of emails, and if you're writing something too long with maybe lots of questions, they're not going to have time to get to it. So just send your email, keep it short and sweet, attach your CV, resume, even maybe a little mini cover letter if you'd like to, just letting them know that you're interested in working at their school. But know that out of all of these schools that you're contacting, only a fraction are going to contact you back. So just be prepared for that. Just gonna check our comments. Hello. Got Natina here, Brent, John, welcome. All right, another question. Best countries to teach abroad. I think that there are a lot of lists out there. You can Google this, what are the best countries to teach abroad? And everyone has their own opinions, because there's a lot of different ways to rank these. You could rank it based on salary. You could rank it based on how easy it is to get the visa, how many jobs there are. I personally believe that the best countries to teach abroad, it's really unique to you, what you're looking for, what your preferences are, what your comfort level is. Are you wanting to go out of your comfort zone? Are you a new teacher and wanting something a bit more comfortable? So it's very, very personal. I do have a video on my channel about how to choose where to teach abroad, just things to consider that maybe you haven't thought of. For example, the weather. When people are teaching abroad, maybe they don't consider that the weather is something very important, but it's going to affect your daily life. So to give you an example, when I taught in Costa Rica, it rained every single day I was there. Without fail, it always just poured. It was beautiful for the rest of the day, but it always rained. And that just happened to be the time that I was walking home from my homestay for lunch. So I wasn't used to this. I'm from Wisconsin, where it's quite cold, and then our summers are quite hot. But this was just something that I had to get used to, and I didn't really think about it before I went there. And I've tended to teach in places that have quite warm weather. Being from Wisconsin, I try and go to places that are quite different, but that is something that can really affect it. But if that's not important to you, weather is not a big thing. Maybe it's the salary. Maybe it's that you want to work in a city as opposed to a rural area. So depending on what you're looking for, that's going to be the best countries to teach abroad. It's a little bit personal, I guess. Okay, another question. I don't want to teach in a classroom. Are these opportunities difficult to find? There are opportunities if you're not wanting to teach in a traditional classroom. So you don't want to teach in an international school, public school, private school, charter school, English language school. You want to do something else. The most popular way would probably to be teaching business English. This could be going to different businesses and maybe you're working with their employees one-on-one, or you're working with small groups. So this would obviously not be a traditional classroom setting, but it's still a classroom in a way. You can also do au pairing. So maybe you're living with a family. There's a lot of different au pair visas and you can help them learn English, but you're in the house and you usually get a lot of time to explore and travel, and usually free or paid for accommodation as well. Online teaching is another option. So you could be traveling around at the beach, in the forest, wherever you want to be, but teaching online. With that, the biggest headache is probably the Wi-Fi signal. Yes, you can go to these beautiful places, but if you can't connect with your students, that's a big issue. So that's just something that you'll want to consider. As far as if these opportunities are difficult to find, it's going to take a bit more to find these kinds of jobs than just applying to teach in schools. But if that's what you're looking for, I think it's worth it. And there are definitely opportunities available. Okay. What qualifications do I need to teach abroad? This is also going to look different depending on how you want to teach abroad. For example, if you just want to teach abroad for short term, maybe 1 year, you're doing a gap year, a few years, that's going to look very different to teaching abroad as your career. So in my case, I started out teaching abroad without a degree. I didn't have much experience, just a bit of tutoring experience. And as I've progressed on my journey, I've gotten my US teaching license. I've gotten a master's in education. I've gotten a CELTA. So it's definitely possible to collect more qualifications as you go through your teach abroad journey. So don't let it stop you if you don't have a degree yet or you haven't done your TEFL. There's time. You can do that as you go. And I actually recommend doing some of your qualifications abroad. I did my master's in Spain. I did my CELTA in Australia. So there are ways to travel and teach, but also get more qualified as you go. But the basics, let's talk about the basic qualifications. Schools are looking for a minimum of 120 hours on your TEFL course, but you want to make sure it's accredited if you're teaching abroad. If you're teaching online, it's usually not as big of a deal to go with one of those cheaper courses. But if you're teaching abroad, you need to make sure that it's an accredited course. And these days, they are looking more for courses that have teaching practice as part of them. A lot of people were doing their TEFL courses. just kind of reading a document, taking some quizzes. Oh, now I'm a teacher. But without that actual practice in the classroom, it can be very difficult if you're a new teacher. So I highly recommend getting a course with teaching practice. Other qualifications, a bachelor's degree in any subject is going to open more doors. If you don't have a degree, that's okay, but you're going to be a lot more limited in where you can teach, which is why if you're wanting to do this long term, it's worth investing in a degree. Other qualifications, I think that it's really a good idea to get some teaching experience before you start your Teach Abroad job search. This doesn't mean that you're working full time at a school, but it could be tutoring, it could be teaching online a few hours a week, it could be working as an assistant teacher or teaching refugees in your local community, just so that you have something and you have some experience that you can put on your CV or resume. And that way you can stand out a little bit more. You're going to be more confident when you're first starting too. But the best place to learn about teaching is in the classroom. So if possible, see if you can shadow a veteran teacher. If you can sit in on their classes, see how they run the classes, manage the time, how they answer their students' questions, offer feedback. That is the most important tool that you can have as a new teacher, is watching, observing these veteran teachers and taking notes, reflecting, and then trying out those techniques in your own classroom. So it's not really a qualification, but it's going to help you a lot and give you a lot of confidence. And anyone who's watching, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Are there any short-term opportunities? This is another popular question that I get a lot. And if you think about it, it's a little bit challenging because if you're wanting to teach in schools, they want a teacher who's going to be there with the class the whole year. And it's not always the best to have new people coming in all the time. You don't know the students. So from the school's perspective, they're usually looking for someone there for the whole school year. From a visa perspective, a lot of these visas, it can take months to get your visa. The process is long, you're submitting paperwork, you're waiting for background checks, you're getting documents stamped and certified, all of these things. So if you do this whole months-long visa process, but then you only go abroad for 3 months, it's a lot. So those are kind of two strikes against short-term opportunities. That being said, there are some opportunities. These are going to look like English immersion summer camps abroad. There are some schools that have rolling admissions, so they're always getting new students and always getting new teachers. So it's a lot easier to kind of start and stop. I worked at a school here in Australia that functions like this. So we had new teachers coming in pretty often, but then people were leaving on long vacations, and yeah, but the students were coming in a lot as well. So it wasn't as big of a deal with the rollover. Other short-term opportunities, this could be maybe you are teaching online, but traveling. Just be careful with this because some countries allow you to teach online on a tourist visa and some do not. So before you decide to do this, definitely check out all of the visa regulations for those countries where you want to go. You can always look at the official websites for the embassy or consulate. They will have the most up-to-date information about those visas. So yes, there's short-term opportunities, harder to find, not always ideal, but if you do some digging, you can definitely find them. Before we get to the next question, I just want to let you know that I am going to be doing some Black Friday bundles. These are going to be, there's 2 for teaching abroad and 1 for teaching online. I haven't done this before, so I thought it might be a nice little extra. You're going to get my membership. I'm opening up Teach Abroad Club for just 5 days for enrollment, and you'll get some bonuses. And for the online bundles, you'll get my online teaching mini course and some bonuses. So if you would like to find out about those bundles, then you can go to my email list and get on that. So if you go to courses.eslteacher365.com/email-list, that's where I'm going to be releasing these first. They are limited supply. So once they're gone, they're gone. If you'd like to get on that list, I highly recommend it. Okay, let's get back to some questions. Okay. How many years of experience should I have before freelance teaching? So freelance teaching is another option. There are some countries abroad that have self-employment or freelancer visas. So you could be working at English language schools. Maybe you work at one, or maybe you work at a few different ones, but you're on a freelancer basis rather than an employee basis. This could also look like doing private tutoring. This could be teaching small groups. This could be business English. This is an option in some countries. How many years of experience you should have? I think it's more about your confidence as a teacher. If you feel that you are confident lesson planning and you are able to source your own materials, and I guess, yeah, confidence is going to be more important than years of experience. But with freelance teaching, you're running a business. So you also need to be business savvy. Often for these visas, you'll have to create your own business plan and submit that with your visa application. So you need to think about how are you going to find your students, what exactly you're offering, and it goes beyond just your teaching experience. You have to be able to run this business on your own too. You're responsible for your taxes. You have to sometimes pay into the Social Security, and that can make it a bit tricky, but there are a lot of teachers doing this, so it definitely is possible. I'm just trying to think of my own experience, like when I felt confident as a freelance teacher. I guess throughout my teach abroad experience, I was working in schools, but I was also freelance teaching privately on the side. So I started with one-on-one students, got my confidence up, worked with them, and then from there did some freelance teaching online. And I did some freelance teaching here in Australia as well. But I think you'll know once you feel confident enough to do this, but definitely be careful with the business aspect of it. What countries can I teach in where I don't need a teaching visa or can stay long term? Unfortunately, anywhere that you go, you're going to need a visa. You can't just show up and stay there. You need to be legally able to work and stay in that country. I don't really know anywhere that you can go and just, be there without getting some sort of visa. It doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be a teaching visa, but you do need to look at that and make sure that you're legal. And as far as staying long term, it's best to look at what visa options are available and the pathway to, is it that you want to be there as a resident? Do you want to get citizenship? Some countries, it's going to be a shorter time period to stay long term. And some countries, it takes like 10 years to get residency. It's really crazy. In Australia here, we have gotten our citizenship, and it was actually quite fast. I think it took, 6 years total, which doesn't sound fast, but it is kind of fast when you consider other places. But it's up to you. If you do teach abroad, you fall in love with another country, look at those visa options, see what the pathways are to live there long term. But yeah, just showing up in countries without visas, I don't recommend that. Not a good one. How can a non-native speaker get a visa to teach abroad? This will depend on the country. For example, in South Korea, you can't. So if you want to teach English in South Korea, there's a specific visa for that, and they unfortunately only accept teachers from 7 specific countries. But if you're looking to teach in Mexico or Thailand, where they accept non-native speakers, then it is possible. So your first step is to look at the countries that you're interested in and see if it's possible. Now, if you want to teach there, but you can't get an English teaching visa, often you can teach a different subject. So maybe you teach math or science. You can teach those as a non-native speaker. You just can't teach English in some countries. So that would be another option. As far as how to get the visa will be the same for anyone. You want to make sure you have the qualifications that you need. You want to make sure that you have some experience, you have a strong CV, you've practiced for your interviews, and you're confident about your teaching abilities. It's not any different. You will probably face more discrimination than other teachers from native speaking countries, but it just means that you're going to need to do more interviews. Unfortunately, that's kind of how the industry is. I always recommend just being as qualified as you can. Get a really nice quality TEFL certificate like CELTA or CERT TESOL, have some experience, be able to show that you are this fantastic teacher, and you'll be a lot more successful as a non-native speaker when trying to find a job abroad. Okay, so those were the questions that I got from my audience ahead of time. So I'll go into the comments and see if there's anything else. Okay, so Joe says, hi, I'd like to work online. Do you know where I can apply? If you want to teach online, you have 3 main options. You can teach for online ESL companies, online teaching marketplaces, or freelance teach online. For online ESL companies, I recommend going to a website. You can search OET Jobs. That is a big kind of database of all these different companies and marketplaces that you can find. That's probably the best place to find jobs. There's also other job boards that you can look at, and I will put those in the comments when we finish, in the description when we finish, just to help you out a little bit. So some online links for jobs. That's easier than just rattling off a bunch of names for you. If you want to teach on marketplaces, these days there were a bunch of marketplaces that started after 2020 and all of that, and some of them have kind of died down, but OutSchool is going pretty strong. You also have different marketplaces that are specifically for languages like Preply and italki. And then freelance teaching, you would be setting up everything yourself. So you wouldn't be looking for those jobs. You would need to set that up on your own. I hope I was able to answer that question. Okay. Is attending a job fair with an agency like Search Associates, how successful are candidates when attending job fairs? What are some things that they like to see from candidates? Good question, John. I recently spoke with Nick from Search Associates, and we talked about this a little bit. He said that the job fair that he did in Melbourne, I think it was last year, it was like 80% of the attendees got positions. So those job fairs are like gold. It's amazing because you're meeting with multiple schools face to face. He also said it's a lot easier to reject someone by email than when they're standing in front of you. But yes, these job fairs do have really high rates of people getting jobs, but also it comes down to you and how flexible you are. Maybe you say, oh, I want to teach in Europe. That's really going to narrow down your possibilities. But if you're a newer teacher and you're open to kind of teaching anywhere, then you're going to get hired a lot easier at these job fairs. And as far as what they like to see from candidates, I would definitely practice your interview skills, make sure those are really strong, and maybe have something, if you've taught before, show a portfolio, show some numbers about your students, what they've achieved. But just having that attitude of being flexible, being willing to try new things, he said that that was kind of the most important thing. So that like can-do attitude of, sure, I'll give it a try is really, really important for candidates. Okay, so thanks for that question, John. All right, Brent says, is it complicated to file income tax returns in the country you're working in, or is it generally simple enough? Good question. I've filed tax returns in Spain, Australia, the US. I think that was it. Yes, that's it. It will depend on how you're teaching. So, for example, in Spain, I was doing language assistant programs, and we were technically making less money than was necessary to file in Spain. So I still filed in the US because you have to file in the US regardless. But once I started working in an American school there, I had to file my Spanish taxes. And I will say, as an American, every time I've filed taxes in other countries, it's been easier than filing US taxes. So if you're American and you're used to all our mess, then like Australia is amazing. It's all online, you just fill it out. It's really easy. Now I do get someone to help me because I run a small business. So if you're doing that, it can be a bit more complicated, but it really depends on the country. But from my experience, anything is easier than the US tax return. Okay. All right, let's get another question. So Nika says, could you please recommend online companies which accept teachers with little to no experience? Okay, so for online companies with little to no experience, Cambly is probably the most popular, but they do a lot of hiring freezes, which means that they have a lot of teachers applying, so they'll just stop accepting people, and then you might be waiting for a really long time for your application to get accepted. So I wouldn't rely on that. I would apply to Cambly, but not really rely on it. Other companies that have little to no experience, with those, the pay is really, really bad. So it's okay to kind of use them to start out, but I don't think it's worth like investing your time in them. I think it's much better to try a marketplace. You can build up your skills there too. So something like italki or Preply, those are good to start out with, but you are competing against a lot of more established teachers. So on marketplaces, it takes a long time to build up your profile, get different reviews, and then once you have a more built up profile, then you'll find that more students find you. But with online companies, those are okay for at first, but not super, super great. So I don't really like recommending too many of them, but Cambly, I guess, is probably the best to start out. Okay. Let's get some more questions. So Cyrus says, do you recommend teaching abroad in Taiwan, where Cyrus wants to go, and freelance teaching online at the same time for the sake of making more money? Do you think it's too difficult to sustain in the long run? For teaching abroad, like in a school, and then freelance teaching online at the same time, first you want to think about the visa. So is this possible? On some visas, it might be tied to the school and you aren't able to work in other ways. So first of all, just check that out, just in general, not Taiwan specifically, but in general. So you have that layer. And then after that, think of how many hours you're teaching and then how many hours you're spending preparing your classes. Then if you still have energy and time, absolutely go for freelance online teaching to up your salary a bit. When I taught in Spain, I was only teaching in one of my schools 16 hours per week, and we had one of those hours was a prep period. And because I had taught for so long in Spain, I had a lot of like lessons saved and all of that stuff, so I wasn't doing too much prep. So I absolutely did freelance teaching. This wasn't online because that wasn't really a thing back then, but I did freelance teaching in the community because, yeah, I needed more money and I had a lot of time. So it depends on if you're working like a full-time job, just kind of see how that goes. And I would say once you're abroad, see how you go for the first month or two, get used to your schedule, get used to your new life there, and then think about adding on that freelance teaching. But if you were freelance teaching already in your country and then bringing that abroad, obviously you don't want your students to have a long gap. So yeah, it'll just take some trial and error, but it's definitely possible. But think about how many hours you're working and kind of what your goals are when teaching abroad. Okay, let's see. So Brent asks, any Latin American countries you think would be especially worth investigating right now? Latin American countries, I think that Colombia is actually a pretty good one. There's a lot of opportunities there for teaching adults and like business English. A lot of people don't want to teach kids. That's a good place to go. If you're a newer teacher, Mexico has a lot of good opportunities too. Chile is always a good one. Don't forget Central America. Costa Rica is amazing to teach in, but it's a little bit hard to do it legally unless you're a certified teacher. What other countries would be good? Depends kind of what you're looking for too. What kind of landscapes that you're looking for. Are you looking for mountains? Are you looking for jungles? Are you looking for beaches? Consider those as well. But yeah, those would be my top picks for Latin America. Okay, any other questions? Just leave them here. All right. So if you do have any other questions, you can always send me an email. I will write it up for you here. I always forget. So leave my email. Here we go. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email, jamie@eslteacher365.com. And I have a lot of fun things planned coming up soon. There will be a webinar coming up, mostly about like, I have my TEFL Now What? Your next steps for teaching abroad. Teach Abroad Bootcamp will be coming back. That was a good one that we did at the start of last year. So I'll be bringing that back after I go home to the US for Christmas. And oh, you're welcome. So I hope that this was helpful. And if you have any other suggestions for other live videos that you would like, other topics for me to talk about, then just let me know. I do plan on doing some online teaching ones in the future. I know that those are in demand as well. And I hope you have a fantastic day, evening, night, wherever you are. Happy teaching. See you next time.